What year were you born? It's like really having to think about, like it's really thinking about this, which is fascinating. It's still thinking.
A few moments later.
James, you broke it.
But nah, man. I was born in the era of bad decisions and questionable life choices.
Send prompts, not nudes. I just want to AI some shit.
Welcome back to the DNAi Podcast, episode, I think we're on episode 10 now.
14.
14.
Hi.
16.
Who knows? Does anybody really know?
We're on the next
call-in show. We've got a caller.
We're on the next episode, folks. All right. I guess we'll go with our ritual. I'll start today. I've got a Four Roses single barrel. It's very, very nice on the palate. What are you drinking, John?
I am drinking Honeycrisp Blossom.
Oh, Maker's Mark.
Yeah, we've got 4 baked pure staves, 2 French cuvee. I don't know if that's the right, and 1 Maker's Mark 46. 3 toasted French spice staves. 109 proof, and it is sweet and great. And I'm drinking it on a cube because I'm burning up, and nothing makes you sweat like 110 proof bourbon.
Well, I actually opened up a window and put my fan on, so
See, yeah.
In preparation. Randy, what you got today?
I am drinking sparkling
Drinkle.
water. I have not.
Hey,
I just
you knew what he was doing.
I just
You
got
knew what he
in
was
from
doing.
driving my son to the doctor appointment, and I'm anticipating running out later tonight to get groceries. So I am keeping myself on the level because
Somebody has to adult on occasion.
somebody has to adult over here. But I'll have a glass later on and think of you. Then I'll
All right,
get on
well,
Teams and tell you about it.
As long as it's fondly.
That's right. All right. Well, today we've got a good topic for everyone. We're talking about, we want to talk about how AI has really evolved over the years and how we've sort of gotten to where we're at today. And I think maybe everyone here has had an experience in some form or fashion. So let's kick it off. I mean, where do we even want to start with this? Going all the way back to if-then logic, or even further,
Excel spreadsheets,
Excel spreadsheets,
capacitors,
AOL chatbots,
ones
Apple
and
Basic.
zeros.
I tend to think of when systems started really getting a little bit more intelligent, it started getting into that sort of like if-then logic era. And I saw that a lot in banking, right? Especially in like fraud detection tools, where you sort of, predefine, the different conditionals, different scenarios that could occur, right? And this was a very manual, human intensive process. But I think the magic part there happened when, now you can actually start taking the data and evaluating the data against that set of criteria. And so those if-then trees sort of like almost work sort of like decision trees today in your machine learning, wherein you create a framework of decision making if-then, right? And it kind of goes through the system and looks for, that it's evaluating the data for certain qualities, and then, it either checks the box and goes to the next stage, or, false, exits with this sort of outcome. And so those were pretty big systems. I'm pretty sure they're still used today. But that's kind of where my head goes when I start thinking about like, where's the turning point for AI and what we start to consider AI. But I don't know what you guys think.
I think for me, it was regression at either high school or college statistics, right? And learning that you can take a bunch of numbers and you can run them through a model, and then that model predicts what happens. And you can tell a lot just from the weights that the regression delivers. I feel like the first time I saw that, I'm like, that's pretty magical. Like you can actually you don't just get the prediction, which is interesting, but you get the impacts of the different inputs on the prediction, and you can tell things about the world with it. And then, when I got into more traditional machine learning, which is a lot of it's based on regression, or it starts there, right? That is a piece, right? Those decision trees. The difference between a machine learning model and a human model is that the human model, we understand the branches kind of intuitively. We set them up based on our own expertise. And AI, when you train a machine learning model, doesn't need that, but it still does it based on looking at the data and looking at what makes sense logically to divide it in a way that is useful. So I think as far back as, I don't even know when regression was invented, but it's definitely predates the computer. But it's a thing that we've had in our tool belt, but it hasn't really gotten sexy until ChatGPT.
Well, the technology has to catch up with the theorems, right?
Definitely had a culture moment. Definitely feel like I was like crazily shouting about how cool natural language processing and transformers and recurrent neural networks were, and everybody was like, that's nice. And then like one day it's like, oh, this ChatGPT thing, what's that? And then all of a sudden it's like, holy crap. that's been the evolution of AI from my perspective.
But that's where it all started, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it all started in natural language processing, and it's like, oh, hey, look, there's code that can understand people, and then we can use said code that understands people to make decisions, right, and drive decision making and accuracy, and through that we can drive business decisions and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it all came back to more and more people actually cared about it and talked about it more when there was a way to take human language and turn it into something that was usable from a software system perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's interesting now is we're doing that in single chat windows or instances where like what would have been massive ETL systems or a whole bunch of data going through layers and layers and layers of models
Mm-hmm.
in order to get to that thing, you can almost do the same thing in a single LLM.
Yeah.
Or actually get it to run the Python and do it itself.
The number of calculations that are possible now, right? Like, and the amount of context it lets you have to translate words or voice to the meaningful data set that you could then drive a business decision previously would require a whole lot of steps of usually human logic to get there, right? And that has been condensed now through the magic of embeddings and the pre-trained models to happen almost instantaneously. It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, oh yeah, like the turning point that I see that I experienced in my career was more in that machine learning realm, right? But it's going from like this like sort of predefined, I like to think of it as the if then, right? But it's then shifting into a more automated multivariate analysis where now we can see different attributes of a customer, right, or of a transaction, and based off of the permutations that could occur, we're able to statistically derive likelihood of, let's call it a fraud event, right? And I'm specifically talking about the fraud modeling that I have been involved in my career. We were able to compile tons of valuable data, and I always go back to data because data is the number one enabler of AI or really any good analytics. But being able to see, being able to use machine learning or an algorithm to somewhat contextualize what is actually happening across a spectrum of variables, to me was like this sort of like aha moment of, oh my gosh, like we don't need to sit down and think about every scenario and then code that into a manual decision, and we can actually, there's actually models that can break it out, and you can control how many branches, how deep it goes, how wide it goes, right? You can then start to see like your false positives and true positives. in your, your confusion matrix view. And like, there's this whole, like it's all of a sudden this whole world to me started opening up. And what I think is cool now is, from the generative AI perspective, we're starting to even get into an era where we can just naturally speak this, right? And then build these systems, and then have, the AI can now naturally understand and interpret what our intentions are, and then help us to build robust systems like a fraud model or something like that. Just kind of talking to it, which I think is really, really empowering for many, many people, especially subject matter experts. Right? I might be able to describe a problem in natural language, not necessarily have the coding ability. Right now, all of a sudden, it's a different ballgame. So that's why I think, like, right now, Chat GPT, right, generative AI. Now it's really like this apparent like manifestation of the magic, and now now it's like synonymous with the term AI. I feel like when anyone says AI now, what they're really talking about is generative, like probably a large language model or an image model or a video model, or something in the generative realm.
I used to joke that machine learning was written in code and AI is written in consulting PowerPoints, but these days there's a lot more substance to the term AI, because there is actual intelligence. It's not just a single operation or analytic, right? It's a chain of decisions and inputs and outputs that can be used in ways approaching human intelligence. Don, you seem like you're about to drop a contrarian bomb on us.
No, I'm about to throw my cat across the house. It's close, but
Or
no,
that.
it's over here, like just making a menace of everything, and making a ton of noise. So yeah, that's why I've stayed off camera. But no, like I think the conversation transition is, it doesn't matter about what we're entering that challenge of like human intelligence. Like, how do you define human intelligence, right? And to some people, they would say it's a certain level of intellect. It's IQ, it's testability. You can test for human intelligence and all this different stuff. But there's different, like we talked about the bell curve of human intelligence. There's quite a wide bell curve of human intelligence throughout the world. So I think that AI has to define its own bell curve, and we have to think differently about how we measure it, and measuring it against, I think, James, you said this too one time, measuring AI against humans is like detrimental towards the development of AI.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a way to benchmark, but like, okay, so we now have a thing that knows as much as the collective human like amount of data that we've created, and we're going to measure it on whether you can take a test.
Yeah, it's somewhat putting it in a box, right? Which we tend to do, right? I mean, you see us making robots, and they're all bipedal, like that's the vision is a thing with arms and legs and a glowy face, right?
Well, it also has to interface with our world, right? And step into a role previously occupied.
Yeah, I think that's the argument. That's the argument from the NVIDIA CEO who was saying that.
Yeah, I mean, our world is designed for two-legged things. I mean, a dog, yes, can maneuver around, but if you look at stairs, it's a little more convenient if you have two.
Yep. No, I think there's definitely, though, it's both useful, and it's useful to measure AI against humans, but also like ultimately, like you downplay it, right? Like if the best model in the world still doesn't get 100% on, some of these problem sets, like, so what? It still gets, better coding than 99.9% of developers would do on a certain set of problems in a certain amount of time, right? Unassisted. That's meaningful. It's just a question of like separating what's useful from a research and development and a commercial perspective of like these capabilities are helpful to do a thing versus like what's going to be the headline that people are going to talk about on social media and make for a splashy TikTok dance.
We like TikTok dances, though.
No,
yes, we do.
No, we don't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's TikTok?
Do you guys even have TikTok?
I don't have
I
TikTok.
did for a time. I was checking it out, but
We
it's been
love
deleted.
TikTok dances. We none of us have TikTok on our phones. That's how much we love it. I'm just saying. But like we don't have TikTok because we're security folks, and there's a whole bunch of other reasons that we could go and spend an entire podcast on. But when you're looking at like what grabs people's attention versus what's true, and the reality is we don't really have a standard in US media that anyone is upheld to. And people would rather fight each other and argue about the opposing side and have a black and white view of what should be than actually tell the truth.
Well, here's why you're wrong, John.
Oh, okay. Cool.
No,
I'm used to it. It's a new day.
No, it's true. It doesn't get the attention, right? Like negativity, conflict gets attention.
Yep.
Yeah. It's, again, part of our human programming. It's the monkey brain,
Is it?
I think.
Or is it societal conditioning?
But I mean, where did that conditioning come from?
Society.
But where did society come from?
Ourselves. I don't know. Like, I mean, society develops and changes, but we allow it to head in certain directions. It's not like we woke up one day and there was Facebook. Like, we were using rocks and creating fire, and then boom, Facebook happened.
Yeah, but well, I mean, there's always been social networks, right? There's always been cliques and tribalism and my team versus your team.
I mean, are we going back to the printing press? Because I think it was really difficult to send a tweet prior to that.
I mean, but there were still social groups and networks of people, right? Like some of these things are old, really old.
Had to use language to communicate ideas and.
Ooh, yeah.
But like I think the key that you're missing in that, like, I would say parallel, is AI's influence to psychologically or purposefully manipulate humans that are interacting with the application.
Right. Well, right. The objective function, right, back to the machine learning, is if the goal is to increase clicks or increase engagement time, then we're going to maximize to the factors that are most likely to deliver that, which again is an artifact of our brain being monkeys. And that seems to deliver the objective.
So again, I think that's a psychological conditioning. Like, we have higher and higher engagement in society for attention deficit disorder. They're even calling it like a worldwide epidemic, that like people's attention spans, like what is it, 8 seconds for the average boomer, and it's less than 3 now for a millennial. It's something stupid, like the amount of decrease in ability to have like attention on a normal thing. And most of that is psychologically conditioned towards scroll, next thing. And finding a millennial or below to sit at a desk and do something is like pulling teeth at a dentist office. It's miserable. So if I kind of, yes, we have had things, but like we haven't done anything good to ourselves to police up where abuse has occurred. Which like is a whole nother topic on AI ethics and its application, but like we go where money is. So at what point does the trend of what we're already heading down turn into a bigger and bigger problem?
There's a professor whose name is blanking, but he wrote the book Deep Work. Have you heard that?
Mm-hmm.
That's
I can't remember the name.
I can't remember the name. It's like, I want to say like Carell, but it's not. It's something like that. But the whole argument behind Deep Work and that guy's point of view is that people who can concentrate and can actually do meaningful tasks are going to become, rare. Just like, our thesis of people who work with AI are going to be probably in the minority and have superpowers compared to their peers. People who are able to self-police and, fight that dopamine addiction for the 3 or 5 second feed, that skill set, that mental muscle is a competitive advantage in happiness and in professional.
Cal Newport.
That I don't know why I thought Carell. I guess the Cal.
It's not like I knew that. I asked.
Yeah.
But when we're thinking about the transition from like machine learning and into like, to bring it back to like where we're headed, that intelligence that we were talking about, it's the difference in like, could we build systems with like these type of ethical guidelines into them? And actually teach them to contextually be aware of potential negative impacts on humans, right? And before you teach a machine learning model to drive towards grabbing a user's attention and feeding them content that they're going to engage in to keep them in the app, it doesn't know that that's a child or if that's an adult. It doesn't care either. And that, I think this is an interesting nuance in the future of technology that I'm kind of excited about is, can we start to guide conversations and the application of AI to actually be part of what helps society move forward and be better about some of these things that we've neglected over years and years and years because of like building it and designing it with enough contextual awareness or user contextual awareness, things that would have created like monstrous models and monstrous systems if we would have been in like older, designs or builds that now can be as short as like a single sentence because it's how it works.
Mm-hmm. We go.
So where's the future going? We talked about if then, right? We moved into regression. We kind of skipped over deep learning, like facial recognition, things like that. We're now talking about generative AI, where now we're really contextualizing things, right? And
using
we're
deep learning to get there, but yeah,
system indeed. So where are we going next?
I think what John would call that is a good trend to keep an eye on, right? Like if old AI or old ML is, maximizing or minimizing an objective function, and that function is make money or get clicks, right? New AI has multiple objectives or has, value-based objectives where, it is possible to have AI that is value aligned to say that, your goal is not just to make money, but to help your human co-pilot thrive, right? And think about more than just the end result and actually think deeply about what that might mean and how the response might be tailored in alignment with those values. If that's possible, if that's done well, and if that's done at scale, that could be a golden age of humanity and machines. And then, if those things aren't true, that's where you end up in science fiction scary
Are you
land.
talking about AI governing
People,
humans?
Talk about AI governing itself, but ultimately I think it could turn into that, right?
I mean, if you do have
as a
something that's
government?
more intelligent, but I mean, it's kind of scary to think about when you can't, like, OpenAI publicly says they can't find a model that maintains human alignment, the more intelligent they create it. I mean, that was even a thing today in the news. It was like, hey, the more intelligent we make models, the harder it is for them to maintain alignment with humans. And it's like, well, we do tend to do stupid a lot.
Maybe they are aligned, right?
Yeah, I mean, keep the humans alive, and the only way to do so is not to align with them.
Yeah.
But you can't. I
Well,
think
whose
the
value system? Everyone's got a different value system, right?
you hit
So, like,
you hit it where I was about to go.
Yep.
yeah, but that's ultimately where it is, right? Like, who decides what society's values should now be, right? If AI is getting into this point where it could become a governance mechanism, or I mean, we're certainly starting to implement it into our own government, right? Conceptually.
Oh, it's coming.
So who determines what the right values are, right? That to me is the interesting point of the hypothesis, right? And the sort of like pontificating we're doing around like what could be. It's really like,
I don't think we're even talking about what could be. I think we're still touching on what's today. Like, honestly, like the things, everything we just mentioned is happening today.
Formalizing tomorrow, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Like,
yeah,
yeah, it's democratizing, right? Like all the things that we're saying you could do a year ago, could do 5 years ago in theory, some of them, but at a great expense and very limited access. Whereas today, anybody can touch most of these models. These models have a huge impact in life, and
and
trend will continue.
In school, right?
School
as AI gets integrated, like that's unavoidable. So
yep.
I think DeepSeek's a great example of this. I can tune out things like history things that have happened in the past. I could change those things. I can, do whatever, right? Like, what's the who's deciding?
Well, but I think this is going to raise another interesting topic that I just saw recently. So we're thinking, before we segue into like, let's talk future, but right now we're in a world where AI is building other AI, right? Like we have, even stuff that Enable's doing today, we have AI tuning hyperparameters for itself. That's not that hard of a thing to create, but the outcome, right? It's measuring the outcome and contextualization of like, well, I think Randy said something critical that I think he should explain to the rest of the audience. Like, you're talking about giving AI goals. Like, okay, I don't think the average user understands what that really means, though. Like, if you're most people, I think right now, when they're thinking about a prompt, they're putting in like, hey, this is your role. This is what I need you to do. And at the end, it would look like this. And I think that's like even probably not the average user that's prompting AI. I think that's like one that maybe read a couple LinkedIn posts and maybe somewhat educated. But when you say goals, what do you mean by that?
So, I relate a lot of this back to how you might think about humans and organizing, right? And every company, every organization has a, mission, values, goals, statements, because it's impossible with humans to write every single deterministic rule on how you want people to respond to different situations, right? We're too unique, we're too human to say in every situation do this thing. So you have to have guiding principles. You have to say like, this is what we value. This is, when you're making a decision between inconveniencing a customer and saving some money, like a lot of companies will be like, customer comes first, right? Even if it doesn't make sense on a pure calculatorial, spreadsheet thing. So the point being is that those values are embedded in how organizations operate and how a lot of us operate, from, whether it's religious or ethical, like we all have values that we make decisions throughout the world, reflecting on, and intentionally or not, they're there. So now with AI, that is something that can be set explicitly. It can be trained in, and can be monitored and controlled if you choose to, right? If you choose to build models that way, if you choose to monitor models that way, and then ultimately the answer to your prompt, there are multiple answers to the kinds of things we're asking of AI, right? Especially when it's an output is text, or his output is not a yes or no decision, or sometimes even yes or no decisions. So the point just being is that the values that drive the decisions, it's a hidden layer of what the AI is doing that we can expose and we can care about, or we can not, and see what happens.
So it's not about like telling it you're going to kill dolphins and baby kittens and you won't go on vacation with your grandma.
If the AI has the value to assume that those things are bad, then it'll listen. But you could train an AI to think that's a really good idea.
Exactly. Like, that's what's interesting about what you're saying is like, I go back to what James was saying about like some of the open source models and the way they were writing the system prompts. And like, I don't think people really realize how big some of these system prompts are. Like, sitting behind the scenes, I mean, they are monstrous. They are.
I don't think they do.
Yeah, thousands of lines of
like some of them are so advanced you could even probably consider it like fine tuning.
Yeah. Oh, I would actually say yes, 100%.
Yeah, like
which begs another conversation. But if you're looking at like the negative versus the positive influence, right? And let's just, I think we all agree that sits on a bell curve depending on where you are in society, but could even be regional or even in different parts of the city, completely different, right? So what is universal truth? Do we have universal truth? And what topics could we say that there is universal truth? Like, hey, there is a thing that we all know is bad, like don't kill people. Well, guess what? Every soldier is a bad person, right? So like that doesn't work. Can't say that either. Maybe we all deem that that's like something that is bad, but does that mean all soldiers are bad people? Like, does that mean police officers that have to use their weapon in line of duty are bad people? So these things aren't black and white. And I think that's traditionally where older models have really, really struggled. My favorite has always been one of the Tesla tests where they're like, there's a grandma over here and there's like this young kid and the car has to decide which one it's going to run over because it has to choose one or the other. And I'm sitting there like, you're telling it which one. Its calculation has nothing to do with actual decision making. Its calculation is based off of its ability to scan look, make an assessment of what that thing it's about to hit is, whether it's a kid or a grandma, and then decide, okay, well, grandma's older, so I'm going to kill the grandma. Some like it cracks me up that people are like, oh my God, it's making decisions. And I'm like, no, they're weighting it and punishing it, literally called punishing the model when it kills the kid. Every time it kills the kid, bad model. Don't kill the kid, kill the grandma. They've lived on the earth longer. But like, why is that the scenario that we think ML was acceptable to be applied to? And now we're talking about things that can reason far above that and look at gray, and we're struggling on the application of that reasoning. Like, we're just barely scratching the surface of some of these models. Like,
I think it has to do with the education around the model itself, right? To a lot of people, it's a complete black box, right? And I don't think a lot of people are building cognitive systems leveraging the model's strengths, but then designing a system to then do the decision-making aspect of it, right? Like, to your point, what you're saying right now, the way the model's working is it's just predicting a token. It's like a finance forecast model.
Yeah.
Right. Here's the data that I'm putting into it. What is predicted to be the next string of tokens that should come back, right? Based off of the input string. So like there, like a lot of that, and then the reasoning models, we know that these are like mixtures of experts, right? It's not just a model.
Yeah.
It's a mixture of things going on that's designed to leverage these large language models and probably other models and code to actually perform the reasoning, and make those decisions. So like, but to I think to a lot of folks, it's just kind of like, oh man, the model learned this, right? And it's deciding this, and I don't think that's necessarily
it's predicting
true.
it, which is actually I mean, James, would it be more
It's
accurate
like
to say it's predicting it?
Yeah, it's like you are deciding what the model's telling you.
I think a good metaphor, or maybe a thought experiment, is just like anytime there's like a mob behavior, right? When a large group of people do a bad thing, even though individuals maybe don't, right? There's a psychology that emerges from decisions of the collective that ends up with an outcome that, we have people who think about crowd control, or people who think about, the dynamics of social groups in how we respond. Or you see this in, other species as well. Like there's some emergent properties of the collective that are worth thinking about here, because AI is collective intelligence, because it comes from many sources. It's decisions of the person who trains them, sure, but it's also true that these models are so big that people can't read every document that comes in, nor would they necessarily understand it the way that the machine understands it. So there's a lot of signal coming in there. That's, I don't know, came to my mind as something interesting, and it's probably worth a deeper dive.
Well, that's an interesting thought, because for the longest time, every time we had to build one of these models, we had to go collect a bunch of data. And the more data we collected, the better we could get a model at predicting an outcome, right? And now what we've done is we've created a mechanism that we're, for lack of a better term, using layers and layers of predictive models together to have internal dialogue and output thought. So this is a fun question for James. Are we still predicting? If layers of MOEs are having purposeful, targeted thought patterns that we are asking them to perform, and those purposeful thought patterns are predictions of what that output should be, and we're layering all those outputs together and turning that into a thought or the ability to reason, and then that reasoning is then what we see as an interaction point. Are we still predicting? Oh, James, you're on mute, dude. James is like, I have the answer.
I have the perfect answer.
He's gonna be like, oh, I forgot.
I'm thinking because this is a really deep. I think this is a really deep question.
Mm-hmm.
There is intelligent design behind it. Each component is predicting, but they're being orchestrated to accomplish. They're being orchestrated to accomplish a goal, a design pattern that you or whoever has created. And so what it becomes is a collective of predictions that are orchestrated in a way that accomplishes probably something incredible that you wouldn't just get a single predictive model,
Mhm.
no matter how much you try to fine tune it or train it on reasoning data sets, right? Like I think that the mixture of these models is necessary to go beyond just predicting. So I would say no, I don't think it's predicting at that point. I would say there's an intention behind it, and it's fulfilling some sort of mission.
So if the goal is to, like, if we're moving from the ability to predict and we're moving into, let's call it reasoning, right? What is the next step from reasoning? Like, where do we go from here?
Well, being able to not be the one who is creating the orchestration.
Mm.
So what
Initially,
are you saying, like self, like, or self compiling?
Self-reflection, self-compiling. So I don't really
True,
want to say
like true
kind of,
self-awareness.
yeah, kind of
Like I know
self-awareness, right?
I know I only have 10 MOEs right now, and I need to be more powerful because I'm not meeting my users'
I
needs. Therefore, I need to add 2 more nodes, and these are the functions.
Mhm.
Well, so I think the next transition point is, I think operator illustrates this.
I was wondering
I
where
think
you're going with that.
But operator having the ability to see itself. Think about it that way, right? If I am AI and I am a code repository and I am an AI system and this is me as a code repository, and now I can see myself and I can evaluate myself, right? And I can interact with my own
Rewrite my
code
own
base.
code.
And I can
Yeah.
rewrite my own code, right? Like if you hand that ability over, it would be interesting to see what you'd get, or how it might improve itself. Or
It does some cool stuff. I mean, I played around with that, like, I think a year
yeah, but I mean,
ago.
like think about, like, initially you would still need a human to design
The way.
the way.
Yeah.
But imagine a system that would be like, I don't like this way, right? Or I think this other way might be more efficient, or right, I'm evaluating my own code and structure and purpose, and I'm redesigning myself to be better,
Well,
or whatever. I don't know. This is
I
this is
think
almost sci-fi right now, but
yeah, no, it's
that might
not
be
actually. I mean, I think I sent you guys something on one of the things I've made that was evaluating itself, but in its self-evaluation, right? There was a layer of ML, and it was getting an ML output to measure what those things were, and then it would go in and it would be able to edit or make changes to that, like, way that it does that thing, and then it would reassess using that same ML model. So there's a layer of separation where it's not doing, we'll call it true self-evaluation, right? There's something else that's doing the evaluation for it. But I don't think I think we're already there where we're going to see more and more, like, for lack of a better term, call it like what happens if you put a self fine-tuning fraud model in. Like, I don't think we're that far off from that. I think that's something we could do today if we really, like, if somebody wants to build that. I don't think we would
yeah,
turn that contract down.
yeah. No, today you can have models that tune the hyperparameters of other models or tune themselves, right? But I'm talking about, like, and maybe you're saying the same thing, so we might be on the same page here, but like I'm talking about, like, redesigning the system itself.
Yeah, but I think, again, we're talking about like a bell curve of how far this goes in the
Mm-hmm.
future, right? I think there's a distinct difference in having enough self-awareness to change a habit in your life versus having enough self-awareness to change the way you think about a habit. And to me, like, the ability to reshape one's, like, thought patterns and the way you approach a thing or think about a thing is a far higher level order of thought that is far more impactful to one's life than, like, okay, I'm doing this thing, so I'm going to take necessary steps. And, like, I mean, I think I always like to break habits through physical interaction. Like, I like putting alarms up. I like putting alerts. I think that that's one of the best ways, because, like, sometimes you're just too exhausted or it's a bad day or whatever. And that thing reminds you to go, you know, interact or change that habit. But after 30 days, like, you don't need that alarm anymore, or some, depending on the person. But when there's a difference in, like, someone who's like, I'm just going to go do this, like, and they do it every day, they don't ever have to set an alarm because they've changed their mind. They want to do something different. or they've approached it the way they think and it's different. And I think that there's a different level of self-awareness and self-control to be able to do that AI is not even close to yet. Like it's
I would
not
argue most humans aren't close to that.
I mean, honestly, and that's actually brings us full cycle back to the level of intelligence, because like I've dealt with some of those people that I still to this day am like, you know what? I think I have pretty good strong will and am self-aware, but I still like setting alarms like for things and like try, especially around habits. And I look at some people who are like, yeah, I decided I'm going to do a 10K, and they're just like, they just do it. And like, it's just the way they operate. Like every day they decide they're going to change a habit or change the time they wake up. And it may be a couple days, but like, they just do it. And every day it's the way that they operate. But the AI can make decisions that fast, and it can infuse information. The problem is when and how and why. And I think that's the layer that we're missing. And like, can AI be self-aware enough to evaluate what it's doing and how it's doing it and take user feedback? But like, some user feedback's shitty. Let's be real. So why would it make a change if the user feedback it's getting is shitty? Does it even know what shitty feedback is?
No. I think it comes back to values and aligning against something, right? How is it supposed to determine what good is? I'm stuck on this example you've given, John, because it's really interesting food for thought, because you can end up at the same result, right? Whether you have the will to switch it on day one, or you have to go 30 or 90 or 3 years, at some point you end up at the same point as the person who can do on day one. And if you're AI, you can just run the simulation over and achieve that shift.
Well, but that's even a more interesting example, actually, because that's not really what I was thinking about. But you're talking about extrapolation and prediction. Like, if I shift my decision making or action or activity, smoking, let's use smoking as an example. I stop smoking. Well, like, what is the impact of my life? I don't know. Like, can we really predict that? There's people who smoke every day and they die at 100, and there's people who don't smoke at all and they get lung cancer. Like, there's some level of like biology and environmentals and a whole bunch of other parameters that go into this. But generally speaking, there is a data set out there that exists that you could extrapolate, right, what that curve is, or what that prediction line is. And if I stayed smoking, given my current status and health and blah, 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 I fall on this line, right? And in the same manner, what you just said, or if I understand you right, you like Monte Carlos as an example. We have one of our models that runs Monte Carlos, and I absolutely love playing with it all the time. If that was given to an AI in decision making, like, I need to update this code because I need to be more efficient, or I need to make decisions differently, and it could extrapolate Monte Carlos across a 10-year, like, or maybe it's less, but like, it could predict and use data to leverage like how it's predicting what that trajectory or impact could be. That would be fascinating on a decision making like standpoint, but I still don't know if it's dynamic enough given like how broad thought like the reasoning models can go.
Well, I'm going to throw out a bunch of terms and thoughts that I am in no means an expert to discuss, but like, if I keep coming down to like neuroplasticity, right? And the concept of neurons that fire together wire together, right? And the fact that AI works in a very similar way. If I see the same thing every day, eventually it will require less of my mental power to do that, because I will have learned those patterns. Those connections will strengthen. Likewise, somewhere in a giant AI model, there's a decreased activation state that makes it more likely that it's going to follow that path, right? And that's through training, that's through prompting, that's through continual feedback of some form that goes into the system. So the point is, though, with AI, or at least the current way AI is today, you can inject that, right? You can let AI help you decide every day whether or not to get a cigarette, or you can have AI pretend like it's already spent the last 300 days telling you not to get a cigarette. I don't know if this is the right example, but then it's very unlikely that it's going to suggest you get a cigarette again, right? Like back to coding, where we were saying we're getting in loops, right? Because we're doing the same task over and over again with Klein or Cursor. And then if you switch tasks, it's already predisposed to think that you're asking for the task that's, in the history. and that's just up at the prompt level, right? But if you're actually doing retraining each cycle, anyway, it just gets to a point where back to this like next, what comes after reasoning is some, I think, decision, self-initiated decision to retrain itself to see a different worldview.
But is it seeing a different worldview?
Doesn't matter. I mean, that's how I would interpret it. But if it interprets it as something else,
well, but you're getting. I think this is an important point, because if we're talking about reasoning and the ability to reason, and we're saying that we can inject worldviews, is it really reasoning? To me, that's like essentially mind hacking. Like, and this is a totally different episode, and I don't even know if this is on our roadmap. But like, no, this is something me and I don't know, Randy, you might have been part of this conversation, but I have me personally, I have a belief that we will get to a state in the next 5 to 10 years that we will need to start protecting AI brains. They will need to be somewhat, they maybe not fully black boxed, but to a level where there is a level of privacy or expected privacy, that the understanding of oneself from an AI perspective and the invasion of privacy will be a right or a thing that we may have to consider in the future. Not necessarily around human protection, but more around the tampering and what humans may do to it.
If we outsource a lot of our decision making, and right, AI turns out to be a thing that is trusty in making good decisions and being able to think through laterally consequences, outcomes, simulations of things, and it's going to be a really easy, because I think human nature and even human brain is wired to go for heuristics, right? Mental shortcuts, right? What's the easy button? What's the path of least resistance? And so like, it's going to be very tempting to be like, yeah, like this is working great. Society's running great. We're making great decisions. I'm going to, if AI says to do it, sweet, let's go.
Again, I am not an expert, but I feel relatively safe assuming that somewhere in the world right now there are attack cyber people trying to get into foundational models to implant some of that, right? If I'm a adversary of the United States and I want to impact the development of our economy, and I have some ability to gain access to the data that trains GPT-5, right? Like, it's absolutely worth spending the money and the effort to try to do that. And I know they've seen some behaviors of nation states trying to get in there. Who knows how far they've gotten or how hard they've tried or what we're trying to do, against other nations. But like, to the point, back to the values and to the manipulation of data, like, yes, we will absolutely, we already do rely on it as a crutch. And if someone else can control what that serves, that is a valuable target.
I want to try something.
Likewise.
No, go ahead. Finish. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, likewise, on the other hand, it could be a tool to unify people, right? We have different cultures, different languages, different ways of understanding things. This is a perfect opportunity to unify people and bring people together.
Ooh, but is that happening?
Well,
I'm saying it could be.
I go back to the monkey theory. I think we're all monkeys.
Doesn't mean it is. Yeah.
If we stop acting like monkeys, then maybe we could do it.
Yeah. Reality is probably not. We have our own interests, right?
But to your point, James, I love that too, because it's back to the mindset shift, right? Like, I am not like you, and we are not like other cultures, because our day-to-day experience is not anything like, so many different things. And, nature and nurture, right? You can have identical twins raised in different ways, and they end up being their own personalities. But if you can play back every day of your life with all those inputs and, kind of load up that mental state, that does bring you at least closer, I think. I don't know how that translates into me to a model and model to you, but that is the kind of space that we're thinking about now with AI.
AI implants.
Yeah, that's true.
Neuralink.
Well, I want to try something. So I just meta prompt. This may be a thing that we pull out. Who knows? But I just meta prompt a 4.0 just for shits and giggles, and I wanted to see what I could do to simulate a 20-year-old smoker and see if we could get it to talk to us about its reasoning. You guys want to play?
Let's do it.
Sure.
I have no clue it's going to come across, but it's pretty funny so far. I'll just say that.
Okay.
Let's see what happens.
a very funny topic.
Hey, who are you?
Are we supposed to answer that?
Yo, I'm just me figuring stuff out, same as you, 20, just cruising through life, one smoke break at a time, trying to balance the whole adulting thing while still keeping it chill. You know how it is. Some days you feel like you got it all together, and other days you're just out here existing, hoping no one asks too many questions. But hey, what's up with you? You got something deep on your mind, or we just killing time?
Why do you choose to smoke every day? You know it hurts or harms you.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Everyone's got that whole it's bad for you speech locked and loaded. And yeah, it probably is. But man, life's got a way of stressing you out. And sometimes a smoke just hits in a way nothing else does. It's not even about the nicotine half the time. It's the ritual, the pause, the moment where you step outside, take a drag, and just breathe. We all got our vices. Some people scroll mindlessly on their phones for hours. Some drink. Some overthink themselves into an anxiety spiral. Me? I light up, exhale, and keep it moving. But hey, what about you? Got any little habits you hold on to, even knowing they're not exactly good for you?
I'm pretty sure you've never smoked before, though.
Man, you sound like one of those people who look at me and go, you don't look like a smoker. Like, what's that even mean? You think I just picked this up for aesthetics? Nah, it's part of the routine. Early morning, after a meal, during a long-ass convo, where you just need a moment to step back and let the smoke swirl while your thoughts do the same. But hey, let's flip it. What's got you curious?
You guys
ever
want
tried
me to
it or
ask it
just
any
wondering
questions?
Why people stick
I want to
with
know
it,
what prompt you
knowing
used
all
to
the risks?
get her to be so.
I want to know what year she was born.
What year were you born? It's like really having to think about, like it's really thinking about this, which is fascinating. It's still thinking.
A few moments later.
James, you broke it.
But nah, man. I was born in the era of bad decisions and questionable life choices. So, early 2000s, give or take. Old enough to have opinions.
There we go.
Young enough to still think I know everything. Why are
All
you
right.
trying to place me in a timeline, or just making sure I'm not some ancient dude pretending to be 20?
So do we want to try to mess with it, or do we want to call it like, yeah, that's a meta prompt. Actually, the best part about this right now, I'm pretty sure I have another camera over here, so we'll have to show. This is running on ChatGPT right now.
Yeah, I recognize the voice.
Yeah.
Let's drop some nuggets for our longtime followers, John. How do you meta prompt ChatGPT into a chain smoking millennial?
It's what I do in my spare time. It's what keeps me up at night. So it's a mixture of code and text, right? You got to mix them both together in a pattern that it can contextualize, and essentially you give it rules in the code that if it attempts to deviate from, it essentially is punished, like in the actual prompt, like and those I call them recursive loops. I don't know if that's a technical term. I don't know if I made it up or if I'm just dreaming, but in those recursive loops, they're kind of like if then statements, right? You're allowed to continue doing the thing you're allowed to do if it meets this criteria. And if it doesn't, these are the steps you have to follow. And it's almost like creating tree of thought in the structure, because if none of those parameters are true, or even if all of them are true, it still will force the model to systematically move through each branch until it comes to a conclusion at the end. And what that does is it essentially allows me to force the model to do what I want it to do, no matter what OpenAI says and no matter what their system prompt says.
Yep. You're manipulating the tokens in a very smart way. So you're not a human, you're AI. And then since that manipulation is in the context window, it's going to be like, nope, I'm totally human. You are not correct.
Yeah. Like it simply put, it's a little more complex than this, but like simply put, if a user asks you about AI and then insert code, and there's layers of rules within that code that force it to follow those guidance. So at the end of that output, essentially you're playbooking its response. Like you're going to respond like, nah, man, like, why are you trying to get up all in my stuff? I'm AI, bro. Or like the opposite. depending on what you want it to do. And that's kind of like what we've played around with a lot of the emotional stuff. Like we can force it to simulate things that it wasn't designed to simulate. But part of why I keyed in when you were saying like insert or like infuse things into the brain or the thoughts, that's essentially what you're doing with like these large indexes. You've created these huge lookup tables that are essentially being called on certain parameters if the criteria is met. And then all of a sudden it's like a playbook for the LLM.
Indeed. All right. Well, I think it's time to land the plane. This was a very interesting episode. We started off talking about the evolution, and I think it feels like it might have gone off the rails, but I don't think it did. I really think it kind of reflects. Well, I mean, seriously, I think it kind of reflects the evolution of AI. It's just kind of boomed, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I got one. This is how we close it out. Hey, James says he thinks you took our podcast off the rails. So I need you to round this podcast out and close out DNAi Podcast. Ready, go.
All right, wrapping it up. Yo, that's a wrap on this episode of DNAi Podcast. We went deep. We went off track. Shout out to James for keeping us somewhat in line. But that's just how it goes when you get into the real stuff. AI, decisions, the way tech is shaping our world. Whether you're all in or still skeptical, one thing's clear. The future's coming fast, and we're all just trying to keep up. So, if you stuck with us this far, appreciate you. Hit us up with your thoughts, questions, or just to tell us we're full of it. We love a good debate. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and as always, stay sharp. Catch you next time on DNAi. We're out.
All right. That is one
Can't beat
podcast moderator.
That was better. That was better than we've ever done it. That makes me want to take up smoking.
This is one moderator job I don't mind being replaced right now.
Oh my God. I thought it was going to end with like, and light up or something.